prominent Russian opposition figure was detained in Moscow earlier this week. This is Vladimir Kara Murza, a politician who has twice suffered suspected poison attacks which he believes were ordered by the Russian regime. On Monday, Kara Murza was sentenced to 15 days in jail on charges of evading police, charges both his lawyer and wife deny. The arrest came just hours after CNN aired an interview with Kara Murza, during which he called Putin's government a, quote, murderous regime. Kara Murza's wife is Yevgenia Kara Murza. We reached her in Washington. I wonder if you could start by telling us about what the latest news is that you have from your husband.
My husband is still serving his 15-day jail sentence in one of the Moscow detention centers. And we are able, thankfully, to speak every day. He gets one call a day. So he keeps in good spirits, as he always does. And he asks not to lose faith. He says that we will somehow make it through, even if it takes longer and even if it's harder than we have ever anticipated.
Let me ask you about that. Pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to ask you about the length of time. 15 days, you mentioned it right there. At this point, do you believe that this will indeed be a 15-day sentence? Do you think that he will be released on time?
In today's Russia, you can never be sure. In today's Russia, it very often happens that charges against opposition activists are piled up against them while they're serving the existing prison sentence. New charges appear out of nowhere because the authorities just come up with something new and they throw it at you, and then again, and then again. So no, I cannot be sure that this is it, that at the end of these 15 days, he will just be released and will be able to come back to us. But we hope, of course, that this will be the case.
There is significant support for your husband. It's support that he has built over the years, certainly amongst politicians in the United States, politicians here in Canada. Do you believe that that could assist him as he attempts to get out of prison?
I believe that, any kind of support always helps, because you realize that you're not alone in this, that there are people who hear you, who see you, and who are willing to raise their voices in your support. That means a lot. But apart from that, in today's Russia, publicity is our only weapon. There is nothing else left. There is no court system. There are no independent media. Since the beginning of the war, there are very few journalists left in Russia, and the last objective source of information, the Echo of Moscow radio station, was closed down right at the beginning of the war. So since then, there are no independent media outlets who would cover arrests of opposition figures, of just opposition activists that happen every day. Over 15,000 people have been arrested since the beginning of the war across Russia for protesting against this war. And hundreds of them are now serving sentences in detention centers all across the country. And there are criminal cases initiated against them every day, because now you can get up to 15 years in prison for just calling this war a war, or for disseminating, as the government calls it, fake news, but in fact, objective information about Putin's army's atrocities in Ukraine.
I'd like to ask you, pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt again, I apologize, but given what your husband had already been through, surviving 2 poisonings, which he believes were the work of the Russian regime, your family nonetheless made the decision that he was going to return to Moscow. Why was that so important to him?
Because he's a Russian politician, and because he needs to be where the Russian people is fighting the evil regime of Mr. Putin. He believes that he wouldn't have the moral right as a politician. He wouldn't have the moral right to call on people to continue the fight if he himself stayed somewhere safe.
Was it a difficult decision for you and your family?
On the one hand, absolutely, because I'm a normal human being. I married the guy to spend the life with him, to grow old together. So yes, I would love to have him home. But on the other hand, I do realize that his fight is important, that it is people like him, those very committed people like him who believe in their cause and who will fight against all odds and who will push forward against all odds. These people change the world. These people bring the real change, and I cannot argue with that. I do realize that his voice is heard. You know, in today's Russia, if you get this kind of special treatment from the Russian government, like my husband's 2 poisoning attempts and now a jail sentence, it means that your voice is heard. It means that your work does not go unnoticed. So unfortunately, for me as just a woman and a mom and a wife, my husband has to be where he has to be to continue his fight. But as his partner and his teammate, I do realize it, I do understand it, and I deeply, deeply respect him for this.
Do you expect that he would remain in Moscow if and when he is released?
I know that he will continue his fight. If he believes that he will be more effective elsewhere, he's going to be. He lives on the plane. You know, he is rarely home. He's mostly somewhere where his voice is heard, where he can speak out on behalf of oppressed Russians, on behalf of his country that Mr. Putin is currently destroying. Because we need to remember that Mr. Putin is destroying not just one country, but 2 countries at the same time. And when he's finally gone, Russia will be left in ruins, and Vladimir will be one of those who will rebuild it from scratch. So he will be where he needs to be the most effective under the circumstances.
And that is where I want to end this conversation, because this program has interviewed your husband numerous times. And the last time we spoke with him, we were asking him about the protests in Russia and whether he had optimism about this being a turning point. I mean, you've described at once a very dark scenario, but also hope for rebuilding. I guess I wonder, at this incredibly difficult moment, personally, at this incredibly difficult moment for Russia, how hopeful you feel you can be.
Oh, I am hopeful. I am hopeful because, you know, in 1968, 7 people got arrested for going out into the Red Square to protest against the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. And later, Prague newspapers wrote that there are at least 7 reasons why they will never be able to hate Russians. When today we can show the world over 15,000 such reasons not to hate Russians. And we know that these voices of Russians who are horrified by Putin's crimes in Ukraine, they're being raised everywhere in the world. And we place our hopes in these people who protest against all odds, who go out in the streets despite all these restrictive measures and restrictive laws that can send them to prison for 15 years for raising their voices, but they still do, because they believe that Russia deserves a better future. My husband believes that, and I believe in it as well, because this is the only way. The good has to prevail in the end.
Yevgenia Kara Murza, we thank you so much for your time, for talking about this with us today, and we wish all the best to you and your family.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.